Good morning. Good morning to everyone joining us on the call. Everyone is well on this warm Tuesday. Thanks to everyone joining us. Feel free to comment on the chat, say good morning, tell us where you are tuning in from. Good morning, Dina, all the way from sunny Durbs. So happy that we can finally say the same about Joburg, sunny Joburg. Yes, finally. Good morning, everyone. Morning, Eric from warm Joburg. While everyone is still joining in, we're going to give it one more minute. Please do remember to scan the QR code. It helps us get all of your information so that we can give you your CPD points for joining the session. All right, we have about 466 people on the call. I think we can kick off so that we have enough time to cover everything. Are you all good, Arabile, on your side?
100%. Yes. Good morning.
All righty. Morning to everyone once again on the call. Thank you for joining us on this lovely Tuesday. I hope you enjoyed today's session because it's a very interesting one. So today we'll be discussing the global trade tensions and their ripple effects on South African business. And who better than to cover this topic than an expert in all things global trade? Our guest today is none other than Arabile Gumede. Arabile is a distinguished independent political and economic analyst and advisor with 2 decades of extensive experience and a remarkable track record of collaboration with hundreds of firms and institutions. His unique perspective is shaped by his experiences both in the United States and South Africa, allowing him to understand complex global dynamics profoundly. For nearly 20 years, he was a key player at Africa's oldest research and policy think tank, where he was instrumental in founding its risk advisory consultancy, transforming the way organizations approach risk and opportunity. Thank you once again for joining us, Arabile. The floor is yours.
Emma, thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. And to everybody, good morning to you. Hopefully, there's a morning where you are. If you're anywhere else in the world, a greeting to you as well. I want to start today by asking one major question that I think we're all going to sit and ask. What is it that you think you know? And why do I ask that? Because we all think we have the answers. My name, Arabile, literally means answer. I'm supposed to have all the answers. I don't. But I think it was my mother foreshadowing the fact that I'm going to be looking for those answers. And that is my daily job. That is my lifeline. That's my bread. That's my bread and butter. Every day I'm looking for answers. So when you've been studying and understanding the world of economics, business, finance for the longest time, and you've known things to be true in one particular way, and then all of a sudden comes what we know to be the big red mean machine of Donald Trump. You ask yourself whether you could ever understand economics, politics, and geopolitics in any particular way, and if anything you've ever studied and thought about has ever made sense. And this is the moment we find ourselves in, unfortunately. We're sitting with the most incredible timelines And that's why we're here right now. That's why I'm going to say to you all that this is the hardest thing we're going to do. It's the hardest thing because we don't know what we're going to have to do. We don't know how we're going to get this right. How do we navigate this tantrum by this one man? The world doesn't know what to do. We don't know what to do. How do we give this the time it's supposed to? How do we plan for the future? How do you plan for your clients and say to them, listen, I think this is the one way we should all be doing things? You don't know for sure. I don't even think Donald Trump, 45th and 47th president of the United States, even knows how. And then, of course, we don't know ourselves how to do this correctly. So, our Asian counterparts, our European counterparts, all of them trying to figure out a way of trying to navigate this tough time. So, how about I paint the picture, especially from a South African context, because that's what matters most, right? Before I do that, I want to say to you, if we think this is the most turbulent time in our country economically, I can give you aspects of global instances where things just happen. And this isn't as bad as it gets. I managed and I was fortunate enough to live in the United Kingdom. I say fortune, I'm probably saying that tongue in cheek. The United Kingdom's weather is, whew, if this is winter in South Africa, man, you should see winter in the UK. And even their summer doesn't hold up to our winter. But nonetheless, in the time that I was in the UK, pretty recently, managed to live over there for at least the last 3 years before coming back home. I saw, wait for it, two monarchs, right? We went from Queen Elizabeth to King Charles in that time, something that is a once in a lifetime element. I saw four prime ministers, four prime ministers in 3 years, right? One that lasted 45 days, I might add. And I saw five vice chancellors or finance ministers, as they call them. If you want to talk about turbulence, that is turbulent. That is an economy that is looking to find its way. It doesn't know where exactly it sits. An economy that feels left behind by the rest of the world and is trying to play catch up. So they lose a few tech companies and they realize, oh man, this should have been here, right? And you worry about how exactly do they get that back? Well, that's what they're doing. They're playing catch up. So we don't want to play catch up. We just want to play to our best abilities. But unfortunately, at this stage, we may already be behind the eight ball. So how do we navigate the tariff tantrum? Well, this is where we're at in South Africa and the US's relationship, right? This is what we're sending out to the United States and them sending to us. And this is what it costs us. It's not annual, it's just on a month-on-month basis, but pretty much this is what it takes. All right. So basically, we give them 261.4 billion rand worth of goods, right? So if we're giving them that and they only take from us 103 billion, that just means we have a trade, or the US has a trade deficit with South Africa. They don't like that. Donald Trump does not like having a trade deficit with any country. This would be and something that makes sense to a lot of people. And this would be the logical step in how you calculate your tariffs if that's going to be the case, right? But that isn't the sense that was used by Donald Trump. Who did we trade with in the month of June this year? Why June? Because Stats SA has the data up until then. Very soon we'll be getting July's data, actually, and this can easily be updated. But there we are, the top 5 countries we exported to. Now, understand that the United States is in both of these. But the question mark is, Despite that being the case, why do they feel like we give them the short straw every single time? Is it because we keep organizing deals that are better for us, or has Donald Trump just managed to latch on to an idea that even if somebody continues to tell him is otherwise, he just does not care? He will not change it. He will just keep on going and assuming the worst of that nation. Because that's what it feels like with us. 7% of our exports go to the United States. Over 7% of our imports are from the United States on a global context. I will argue that it is because of number one, China occupying the top spot on both of those. The rest of the world doesn't want China to win. Do you know how China became the powerhouse it became today? Does anybody, and I say that just with the thought of understanding it, because Bill Clinton said, how about we create globalization? We create the infrastructure and the ability to give jobs elsewhere, get that back, right? Get that back to us. And however we get that back is going to infiltrate the rest of the world, and we're going to be good for it because manufacturing is going to be cheap. Manufacturing and the ability to 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 get items and products is going to be much cheaper. So Bill Clinton, President of the United States, says we're going to create a manufacturing hub elsewhere in the world. China became that place. Why? Because of location, because of distribution, because of cheap workforce, and because financially it just made more sense. So we created China as it currently stands. Now we sit back saying the same United States would like to do away with China's advantage. That's what's made Donald Trump very angry. So we are now part of that in a way. I'm not saying that this is ultimately what Donald Trump saw. Sometimes you wonder whether he has any logic to any of the things he sees. But that country, that number one country there, is a key proponent of that conversation time and time again. And it is in any way that if that keeps happening, he just wants to ensure that the US takes up number one spot, no matter what. Now, as I said, the moment he sees a trade deficit, he is fuming. It doesn't matter if you guys were the greatest of trade partners for the longest amount of time. It, logically, it makes no sense. But it happens when you're a big country taking from a small country. What is it that we could want from the United States that would take up more money than they take from us? It wouldn't make sense. We're a much smaller economy. So even if they were to take our citrus, to take our vehicles, they would obviously be taking it for a bigger market than we would be taking anything from them. But that understanding does not live in the world of Donald Trump. So for him, it's a case of we need to make a way to make this work for us right now. Now, some might say, okay, how about we just wait it out, right? Just wait it out. Life happens. We'll figure it out later. Just Donald Trump only has 3.5 years to go. Can you wait that long for an economy that is already struggling? Just 2 weeks ago, our Reserve Bank governor gave a speech at the National School of Government and said, and started off by saying that the problem with South Africa's growth is that it may not be the worst in the world, but the countries that have worse growth than us are going through wars or inflation super cycles. Just listen to that for a second. We do not have an inflation. So our inflation, as high as some may think it is, at 3.5% according to the last reading, is not high for an emerging market. right? The Reserve Bank is trying to do everything they can to ensure that it remains at 3%. And we can discuss the issue around inflation trying to stay at 3%. But what they're trying to do and make sure of is that our money retains its value as much as possible. It's hard to do when you're the one that consumes things from the United States. So it is sometimes just based on the United States and what they see, and they determine everything. But still, the Reserve Bank is doing their absolute best in that regard. Now, if the Reserve Bank governor himself is saying the problem here is that the countries that have growth that is lower than ours, they're going through the worst of the worst. They're going through the pits. It's absolutely horrible there. If that is the case, man, you begin to ask yourself, what are we doing there? Are we at war? Is inflation out the roof at like 80, 120? You remember Venezuela, Argentina, Zimbabwe, Greece not so long ago? Italy had similar issues. While we may think of Brexit, before that, there was Grexit. So, globally, in the context of the world, we need to understand that we've allowed ourselves to fall too far down the pecking order for an economy that is meant to be the most advanced economy on our continent. Because that's what we are. But we're not performing like it. And yes, we can go into all the issues that we face as a country. But unfortunately, what's happening now with Donald Trump could make that worse. Why? Because of this. It's easy for us to say, let's just find other partners. Let's just find other people. Where do you find somebody who's going to take 7% of your exports and another country who's going to give you 7.6% of the exports you consume from the rest of the world? Where do you do that in this global landscape? How do you as a country then remain competitive? We've we've shot ourselves in the foot because of the amount of debt we already carry. Not so long ago, we had already just agreed another infrastructure bill then from the World Bank asking for more money. Right? Because what are we trying to do? According to the Gauteng Premier, Panyaza Lesufi, we would like to make Johannesburg into a construction site. Because we're rebuilding or we're fixing, or where's that money coming from? Because the city of Joburg is already struggling financially. It has no money. I've just shown you the trickle down effect from a national level or from a global level to a national level, provincial to a city. That is happening across the board. Our struggles are so many in this country. Just today on the news, we reported on a school it's called Mulberry Primary School in KwaZulu-Natal, in a place called Uzinyati. And that school has kids who have to travel kilometers upon kilometers across the most torrential terrain possible, hills and all. And I'm talking about hills looking like mountains in order just to get to school. Where's the public transport system? Where's the scholar transport system? So all those problems become so many. I don't mean to make this dire and dreary, but unfortunately, I've been known to be called the bearer of bad news, and that's unfortunately what this is. Let me come to this industry, to our industry, to the industry we're talking about today, to the one you guys follow on a daily basis. Please follow the maroon mark. Of everybody that earns less than 20,000 Rand per month, less than 20,000 Rand, right? That's their disposable income. And I'm talking about take home pay here as well, right? Their disposable income is below 20,000 Rand. Insurance only makes up 1% of everything they need to buy on average. Why am I linking this to my previous statement? This means that Every time somebody's thinking of spending their money in the economy we're facing, in the difficulties we're facing, because goods and goods have gone up. The price of things has risen astronomically. So much so that the latest report by Debt Busters states that more than 64% of the money that we actually get sometimes goes back into debt. We're paying off debt. So you see the rubric in front of you and you think, okay, but we spend on food and groceries, housing and rent, petrol and transport. How much of that are we paying off in debt? You may be paying your petrol or your transport on your credit card. Food and groceries, maybe through credit card. Your housing and your rent technically is debt because housing could be your bond, right? Your cell phone bill, bank charges, more debt. Your clothing might even be via debt as well. So all those costs add up. And if you're using 60% of your income just to pay for debt in some instances, where does this fit in? How much of this are you then actually going to spend up on? This is according to Stats SA. Now, if you're playing in this bracket, it becomes harder for you to find clients because the economic and tariff situation in the world has made it difficult for everything that goes down. And cost-wise, it brings down the ability for me to buy other things. If I'm looking to be buying food on a daily basis, I'm not spending it on insurance. So it makes it extremely difficult for this industry. But as you get higher, like I said, follow the maroon box or the burgundy box. And as you go above 20,000 Rand, that share of insurance rises to 9%. In fact, that 9% goes into double digits and as far as 16% if you're above 35,000 Rand in disposable income. So there's a lot more room to play with there. Those are the people. But here's my question mark. How many times have we continuously heard that the middle class keeps getting squeezed? These are the kind of people we're talking about. Every time we just keep doing this. So what's the first cost that goes? First things that go. This is my mark of the expendables. Things that you're willing to let go of. Right? And one of those things is easily DSTV and alcohol. You'd be surprised as to how much people cut out on that, more so women than men. But then you have insurance and medical aid, and that is the mark. Medical aid is a kind of insurance, right? So that fits in there. So people are 10% more likely to cut insurance and medical aid, which then cuts this box even further. It cuts that one almost to zero. But for this one, the one you're supposed to be able to play with, when things get tough, people will immediately look to that to say, perhaps I cannot spend money on that. And if I cannot spend money on insurance and medical aid, it cuts down your business. It's all the way from those tariffs. Because everything now begins to cost a whole lot more. These manufacturers aren't able to sell the items they used to sell. We're not able to sell the cars we used to be able to sell as a country. So where does that leave us? Well, then what is those manufacturers doing? They're not going to invest in this country, less jobs in future, less people earning money, higher unemployment rate, lower growth, and the problems just persist in terms of inability to spend and less on development in this country. Less by way of taxes, less roads get fixed. And of course, we have to add corruption to this mix, right? Because that's the country we live in, and that's the state of the world, really. And it's unfortunate that that is the case. But this is where we stand. This is how difficult it becomes then for normal, everyday people. You're more than 20% more likely to cut DSTV and alcohol spend, but you're also more than around 10% more likely to cut insurance and medical aid the moment the rubber hits the road. So that's the field you're playing in right now. This is what tariffs do. They're a ticking time bomb. They absolutely kill industries. They create and cause this weakness that we didn't think we had. Why? Because we thought the world was global. I thought we were doing this globalization thing. But maybe we're not anymore. Maybe globalization isn't what it used to be. NATO said that they would definitely go in and fight for anybody and everybody. But they're not doing that right now. They're just standing there saying, we'll give you more weapons. We'll give Ukraine a few more of this and that and the other. So it creates a problem on things like fertilizer, things like gas become a problem. So Germany has to find another way to deal with their gas prices. So gas prices go up. Now we suffer the impact of that. Not because we buy our gas from Russia, but because global prices then head higher. And any gas we buy is higher, right? That means you're unable to afford gas like you used to, and salaries have dwindled. And it's not that you're earning less, it's just worth less. And so when supply chains stall, as they will because of these tariffs, companies decide, well, I'm either going to take on less of this item or I'm going to close down. And if you begin to close down, jobs are lost. The more jobs you lose, that economy falters. Industries collapse because of that. Industries quite literally fall to the ground. South Africa's textile industry used to be one of the best on the continent. That's fallen by the wayside. It wasn't because of tariffs. But what I'm trying to prove here is if companies feel like they cannot get a competitive edge, and remember, competitive edges are what comes from the global context of tariffs and trade. So if I no longer have that competitive edge to the rest of the world, then surely jobs are going to be lost. Companies are going to close. Industries will struggle or collapse. Now, consumers won't be able to afford certain items because they've lost their jobs. Inflation is also likely to then go up. And if inflation then goes up, interest rates increase, your affordability drops even more, you get weak growth, a stumbling and falling economy. It's the timeline of doom. And man, all I've done on this Tuesday is depress all of us so much. Even I'm depressed just thinking about this. Because wow, it just feels like there's nothing great in sight. So how do you find the best way forward here? What is the best way forward? Listen, I'm trying to find that out. I'm trying to understand where exactly do we go from here, not just as a country, but also just as a generation who has to tackle the world differently to what it was 20 years ago. Right? Technology changes things completely. Artificial intelligence has changed the world completely. Nobody cared about chips until 2020. And yet they were in everything. And now when I say chips, somebody will be like, are you talking about these? Or are we talking about computer chips? They were a foreign concept. Now, the biggest company in the world, or the most valuable company in the world, should I say, one of Nvidia, Apple, their biggest proponents are chip making. Now we sit with a totally different world. And so tariffs look different, competitive advantages look different, trade looks different between certain countries because we're looking for that competitive edge and we're no longer caring what it looks like to somebody else. We want what we want. It's all about us, no one else. What are the solutions? Now, these are just words, right? Unless you put them into some sort of context. What is strategic sourcing? That just means looking elsewhere. But what did I say to you? How do you find somebody to give you 7% of the things you trade in? Where do you find a company that's going to give you that? I've sat in dialogues and conversations with world leaders who are saying the African Free Trade Area Agreement is going to be the best thing for this continent. Sure, but nobody can even agree on which routes do we take for that. Some of the stumbling blocks are as simple as that. Which route are you going to take in order to give this item from me to you? How do two warring countries fit into the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement? Just think about it. Central and Eastern Africa, the Congo. How exactly do those countries that are struggling and are fighting actually fit into the mix? How do the Arab nations feel about being part of this when they're so intertwined in being part of the Middle East and, if possible, the greater Europe? Where does a country like Mauritania sit in all of this? Ever thought about Mauritania? What about Liberia? Why am I asking all of that? We're sitting in a South African context, but South Africa is trying to champion this African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. And if that means we're trading with each other, all of those parties have other people that they're beholden to. Liberia, in many ways, is the United States' way of saying, Africa, this is what we have for you. The slave trade went all the way down to Africa. They took the slaves from the US and really left them in Liberia. And yes, it's partly why you even see the flags being similar, right? But who's their biggest trading partner? Yeah, it is the United States. So across the continent, we have other problems and issues to deal with. So how do we, as South Africans, still remain this place of gatewayism? We're the gateway into Africa. What does the gateway into Africa look like? Especially when barely half the continent even speaks English as its primary language. Where francophone countries rule so vastly, which is why you have Canal Plus from France looking to buy multi-choice so that your DSTV will no longer be owned by the former, former Naspers backed company. It's now going to be fully owned by Canal Plus, a French TV company. But we're trying to integrate, right? We're creating this globalization. We still want to be at the forefront of the conversation. South Africa faces the hardest time in trying to get this right because we want to lead conversations, and yet we're so far behind on our economic stances and where we sit on growth. If we were growing vastly, it would be easy to lead. We would be the steering ship. But if you think about it, countries like Rwanda have better growth than us. Is it from a good base? No, of course not. But even as the most advanced economy on the continent, what have we done with that? Why is our crime level worse than Rwanda's? Why is our corruption level worse than Rwanda's? Those are the things that are dragging us down. If we didn't have all those elements, it's easy then to, well, not easy, but it becomes a lot more, you become a lot more confident in being able to deal with tariffs because you know how you as a country are able to find and fight it. Are the solutions easy? No, of course not. They never will be. I always say that politics gets in the way of good economics. Because economic theory sounds great until a politician gets involved. I'm not saying that they're all inherently bad people, but politics is about so much give and take that you have to give what you shouldn't have in an economic context. So you play politics and not play economics. So everything we think makes sense doesn't sometimes. Here are some of the other solutions. Leverage other trade agreements. It's also a little bit hard to do now in the context of the global economy, isn't it? I mean, just think about it. We are going to lose AGOA if we haven't already, technically. The African Growth and Opportunities Act with the United States saw South Africa gain a lot more because we would give them our citrus and our vehicles for one, and some of our textile actually. But that became too much of a problem. Do you know that there are countries across Africa that were giving clothing, particularly in West Africa, that were giving clothing to the United States, but the United States was then dumping secondhand clothing in those countries, right? Sure. That's trade, dumping. So then when those countries decide we're no longer going to allow this to happen in our country, the United States implements tariffs, and now anything they send to the United States, people will be like, oh, it's no longer as competitive for me, so I'm not going to buy it. And if they don't buy it, those industries suffer in those countries because who do their sales go to? They aren't making as much money as they used to, or any money at all in some contexts, and have to close down. But we do need to find a way to leverage our other trade agreements, which is why South Africa does so well with trying to find the agreements with the likes of Europe, with Asia, and try to strengthen that more. Just last week, President Cyril Ramaphosa was in Japan for what is called TICAD 9, I think it was. That's the Trade and Investment Conference on African Development. We've been to that twice now. We've met with Japan 3 times in 2 years to try and show you the kind of work we're trying to do there. We've literally sent fruit back to Indonesia because now we've found a different loophole. And our new agriculture minister, John Steenhuisen, is able to find different markets. Those are the agreements that we're going to have to try and leverage. We might even have to try and find a way to sell snow back to Iceland. That's how difficult it really could be. I'm just saying that you have to find another way to make it work in a global context. It puts more pressure on everything from the global context right down to everyday citizens, you and I, and we struggle with it. Optimizing customs valuation and transfer pricing, that just means that the prices we have with each other, we need to try and look at it a little bit differently. Because maybe we give a certain price to a certain area in order to get something back in return. Right? Utilize free trade zones. There are quite a few of those that actually exist, some of which are even in Ghana. Ghana has this excellent free trade area. And the significance thereof is the ability to trade back and forth on the Gold Coast, right there. Right? That trade route is not infiltrated or bothered or worried or concerned about any of the shipping issues that persist along the Suez Canal or the Strait of Hormuz. Right? So we could use that, explore new markets, especially in Africa. There we are. That's the African Free Trade Area Agreement. But can we do it? How can we do it? How? Because every single day we sit there going, oh man, if we traded really well with Kenya, all of our tea could come from there. Do you know that the United States cannot produce coffee in any part of their country? They don't produce any of their coffee. None. They can't do it. And yet they're going to tariff the countries that can. Fine, Kenya won't necessarily suffer in the sense that, or Ivory Coast, or anybody else that produces tea and coffee. But if you think about it, it becomes less competitive. So where does Starbucks then go to look for their goods? they're going to have to find another place that is hopefully cheaper. Now, Moroccan beans feel a little bit better to buy out. That means you've killed off another market in Africa. Saudi Arabia, or maybe some Middle Eastern area has better coffee beans. Maybe not better, but cheaper, because the tariffs on those countries aren't as high. We lose our competitive advantage. So some might ask themselves, why is President Cyril Ramaphosa then speaking to Europe so much about the Russia-Ukraine war? Do you know that just on Friday, President Cyril Ramaphosa was speaking to the European leaders, including Volodymyr Zelensky, Emmanuel Macron, Sir Keir Starmer, Giorgia Meloni from Italy, all about how do we stop the war in Russia and Ukraine? How does South Africa fit into that context? How does this lowly economic hub right at the bottom of Africa get to solve a war in Russia and Ukraine? We don't. But the fact of the matter is, soft politics matters because that's how you strengthen regional partnerships. Because post that, the kind of wheat, the kind of imports we could get from Ukraine, from the rest of Europe, could be helpful to our market. Those are the things that we hope in time will help us get to that 7% again of the United States if we're looking to completely replace them, which I don't think is bound to happen, which I don't think is going to be healthy for us as a country. So it's going to have to be a dynamic approach completely on a global context for South Africa. It's the toughest moments for us. But sometimes even some of the solutions are staring us right in the face, man. Like we sit there and think, oh, I have to rack my brain around it. No, there are things that are happening right now if you just removed the red tape. How many times have we spoken about red tape? The more we make things like trade easy for South Africans, the more money gets infiltrated back into this country, the more jobs we create, the more spending we can create, the more growth we can create for this country, the more ability for people to be able to spend their money on the day-to-day goods that we need. South African businesses could thrive from certainty, from ease of doing business. And that is the current difficulties because you don't know what's going to happen next. And while Donald Trump is key reason behind a lot of that, if we make our own lives easy, we could definitely change the scenario too. It doesn't have to be like this. So I'm going to end off by just saying this very quickly. And this is a story. It's from my favorite book here called Rubaiyat, right? And it goes like this. There were two monks who were traveling along the forest, and the older monk was giving the other monk teachings, right, on their monastery, on the life the younger monk was about to live. So it's an older monk and a younger monk. As they were walking, they find themselves near a river, but this river is gushing. The water is absolutely flowing. It's not easy to just get through. And there's this old lady who's sitting right across it, who's looking to cross that river. If you know anything about monks, they're not allowed to touch women, right? Especially at a particular time in their teachings. But despite that, the older monk lifts the old lady and carries her over and drops her. And they continue on their way. Now, the younger monk, while still listening to the older monk give his teachings about life, etc., is still bothered by what he just saw because he just thought, but we weren't supposed to do this. So why did he do it? He's still grappling with that. And so about 30 minutes later from the time they had carried that lady to the time they to where they are at that point. 30 minutes later, the younger monk musters up enough courage to then ask, I'm so sorry, I need to say this, but I need to find out why, sir, did you pick up that lady, knowing very well that we aren't allowed to? The older monk's response was, I carried that lady 30 minutes ago. Why are you still carrying her? We carry so much of the baggage of our past in our trade relations, in our business relations, in how we culturally see each other, that we avoid the ability to move forward. I'm not saying let go and never forget it or never remember it, but don't let it hold you back from what could possibly be achieved in future. I certainly hope that's been helpful in some way to us here, because I think the journey we're about to travel globally is about to be a very treacherous one. Treacherous one. I believe I'll be open for questions then as well for the next couple of minutes. If you have anything you'd like to ask, I will give my absolute best answer. Again, I don't know everything, but I swear I will give my absolute best assessment of things and how I've seen it.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Arabile, for an excellent presentation. Um, I think a lot of people from the audience are quite depressed by the stats that you shared. But we do need to be aware of these insights. You know, there's no point in closing our eyes and pretending that these things are not happening. So these are definitely important conversations that we all need to be having, because it's the reality that we're currently living in. We have a comment from someone who wants the name of the book that you just spoke about. I think they found it fascinating. Are you on mute?
Yes,
There we
sorry.
go.
So it is called Rubaiyat Off, and it is actually by Omar Khayyam, right at the bottom there as well. So hopefully that helps. This is a one of one edition, in the sense that it's the only hard copy I could ever find, so I had to repackage it and recover it as well. So I'm not sure if you'll be able to find it, but if you do, please, please, please do. It is an absolutely great book. Everything from philosophy to understanding man, as well. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Arabile. We don't have questions, but we have rather comments. While you were
Mm.
still going through your presentation, we had a comment from Derek who said the difference with the UK is that they currently still remain solid in global terms, even with the turmoil. Turmoil, I beg your pardon.
Yeah, and Derek, you're right in the sense that people view them as being solid. Why? Because certain things work, right? Having lived there, you have a public transport system which always works. It goes through many issues, and in the summer, it heats up so much that it stops working, believe it or not, because the country is insulated and actually is only fit for the winter. So that is an issue. But one thing is for sure, you're right. They do have a sense of stability. Things do currently work. But 14 years of the Conservative Party government has actually dilapidated that entire industry, that entire economy, should I say. They're going through their own economic crisis. If you just Google cost of living crisis UK, just look at the erosion of the UK pound in context to the rest of the world. You will see how bad things lie. So Keir Starmer, right now, who's been voted in as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, I can guarantee you, having covered those elections live, did not win the election because he was a better candidate, but because people were tired of the Conservative Party. So yes, the turmoil, you're right. They look solid. But it's because from a global context, they're still able to give to the world economically. But their people are struggling. They're struggling every single day. The cost of living crisis in the UK is something to worry about. And I implore you to actually take a look at that as well. But I fully take on your comment.
All right. Thank you for that, Arabile. We just got a question that just came in now. Trying to go back to the question. We had a question from Samuel that I'm trying to get back to.
All right.
Samuel, will you mind sending that question again? I think it's now lost with the incoming messages. Sorry about that. One thing I noted that you mentioned during your presentation is politics gets in the way of good economics. And I think
Yeah,
that is so true because I've often thought to myself, we have so many incredible politicians who are brilliant, who have so many amazing insights, but you find that every single person wants to start their own political party. Whereas if they came together and merged their ideas, they would come up with so many incredible solutions. So
100%. Yeah.
yeah,
Look, you're so right. It's exactly why we have how many political parties that are registered?
I've lost count.
Precisely. And so when you are looking to vote, I'm not saying that we should only have two like the United States, but just consider the fact that so many of these political parties, in fact, overlap. And because they disagree on one thing, they then thought we're going to split and create a different political party. Where does that make sense? Where is that now thinking about you as the consumer? And it's just sad because there's many of those aspects. Do you remember the party called Ahang?
Yes.
So where was that? Because that looked like a party for the future. Do you know that Ahang's policies and Bosa, which is now led by Musima Imani, is
Mm-hmm.
almost the exact same thing, differed by one political point? So we've just changed that aspect. And yet, the economic point of view from both those parties is the same. So who are you serving at each point in time? And I think that for me is a big issue. Politics just does so much harm sometimes because we're always jostling for position. And the moment we forget about position and start fighting for just what is necessary for everyone, it's probably the only time we can ever get it right. But it is difficult, unfortunately. But yeah, that is my own belief. Politics can get in the way and does get in the way of good economics. Yeah.
Mm. And we have a comment from Wendy who agrees. Wendy says it's all about power, not serving citizens. It's like spoiled kids throwing tantrums.
Listen, if we saw Parliament in the first few years of the EFF, that told you everything you needed to see, right? It was all these tantrums. Right now, the biggest tantrum is that we have suspended the police minister and hired somebody else to be interim police minister. But the Konto Sizwe party is complaining, saying, no, you cannot do that. You just should either fire. And I'm just like, I'm not saying don't fire him. I'm saying at least action has been taken. We can't fight that. We need to be fighting this corruption. Why don't we stop using the court so much for this one thing and actually work towards fighting this darned corruption in this country? Because then we wouldn't have a KZN police commissioner trying to out the police minister or the national police commissioner, or having issues with the judiciary, or having issues then with other gangs, etc. It's just horrible, and there are solutions, but there's too much politicking. And if we stopped that, we'd be all the better for it.
Mhm. Absolutely. I'm unable to find Samuel's question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and find it after the session, and then
Sure.
I'm going to send it directly to you, Arabile, and then you can put together a response for Samuel, and then we'll share the response with Samuel.
Yeah, sounds absolutely good. Look, I want to say to everyone here as well, guys, everybody that's left, just there was a kid who wanted a parrot, right? And she asked her dad to go get her a parrot. She got the parrot, got home with the parrot, and the parrot just sat on the in the kitchen table, basically. And what parrots are known for is speaking. And the kid
Yes.
just wanted this parrot to speak, and it didn't speak at all. right? They went back to the pet store the next day. The pet shop owner was like, let's get a cage for the parrot. So they got a cage and hoped that it would feel a little bit safer. And in that environment, it would be willing to talk. It didn't. Okay. Then they go back to the pet shop the next day and they ask the pet shop owner, what do we do now? And the pet shop owner said, how about we give the parrot a few trinkets and toys within its cage and maybe it'll feel a little bit more comfortable then. Still no luck. They go back the next day and they decide to buy sort of this little tree bark and this branch so it can sit on this thing inside that cage. Goodness, they try everything for 4 days straight. Still, the parrot doesn't speak. The problem on the fifth day is that the parrot died. All the parrot needed was food.
Sure.
Hadn't been fed. We're looking for the most intricate solutions to fixing this country. Sometimes they're so simple. We need to just look right in front of us. Let's not complicate this thing. Let's just find the simplest, and I promise you they work. It all works. We just forgotten that, and we're trying to do politics a little bit too much. I really hope that's helped to anyone and everyone who's been listening, watching. I really hope that that's helped, and I really hope that you understand that it's going to be difficult for us everyday citizens, for everybody to be able to, one, yes, insurance and buy that and pay for that a little bit more, but more than anything, just everyday goods and services are going to be difficult to do and put together.
Absolutely. So I managed to find Samuel's question. So that's going to be the last one that we take before we wrap up the session. So Samuel's question is, as insurers in trade finance, how can we navigate the US tariffs in mitigating risks associated with our clients exposed to the 30% imposed on the automotive industry?
Look, I think overall, one of the bigger things is you're going to have to try and create that competitive advantage. You can't now create it only on price. You're going to have to create it on value. What is it that you are offering that is different to anybody else? That now cannot be surpassed, or even if it is surpassed, is not surpassed vastly by anybody else. You need to make yourself number one. You need to come for that number one spot through value propositions that nobody else possibly has. That does mean changing things around. That means being more lenient. But what it can do, and I'll give you an example. If you were to offer, and this is just a random example, but if somebody offers you Wi-Fi on a contract and says for the first 3 months you'll only pay 200 Rand and after that you'll pay 600, you begin to think, actually, I'll take the 200 Rand. That's a 400 Rand saving for 3 months. That's 1,200 Rand. Who else in the world is giving you 1,200 Rand? And I'm not saying that that's a direct correlation to this, but just think of the value add you are bringing to your clients and your customers. Are you always available to help and assist? Are you always on call? What are the benefits and other attributes to that insurance claim and benefit that they could actually get from it? And I think that for me is exactly how you develop and create an environment in which you navigate this now. It's no longer going to be about price. It's going to be about value.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Arabile. Samuel, I hope that answers your question. It seems we are out of time. Thank you so much, Arabile, for your time and the great insights that we have received in today's session. I hope all of you walked away with some great insights of the economy and where we are currently. So thank you so much to everyone for tuning into the session. I hope all of you had the opportunity to scan the QR codes and fill in your details for CPD points. If you have any queries regarding CPD points, please send all emails to cpd@acdevelop.co.za and they will assist you. So we will see you next week, same time, same place. Thank you, Arabile.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye, everybody.